Presentation by Alexis Higa. Where and when did it occur? Where? Bligh Reef in Prince William Sound, Alaska. When? March 24th, 1989. What caused it? Oil spill of over 11 million gallons of oil. Cause? Exxon Valdez oil tanker struck Bligh Reef, ruptured its hull. Effects on the environment. Posed many threats to the food chain. Many different species were harmed. Oil is highly dangerous, poisonous, and suffocating for the life there. Effects on humans. The economy soared downwards. An estimated amount, $300 million of economic harm came to thousands of people who depended on commercial fishing. How long did it take to clean up? What were the side effects? It took about 3 years to clean up, around 1989 to 1992, still being monitored today to observe any lasting side effects. What was done to fix the disaster? Coast Guard coordinator took action for the cleanup. First closed the port to all traffic, then others came to assess the damage done. A day later, teams discussed what to do in a teleconference. Then the company responsible for the ship assumed responsibility and set up centers for communication. More guards, agencies, and specialists came to help. Forecasts were provided to help workers adapt to conditions, and other specialists were sent to help the animals. 3 methods were used in order to clean up the mess: burning, mechanical cleanup, and chemical dispersants. What the government is doing for prevention. To prevent disasters like this from happening again, Congress passed the Oil Pollution Act of 1990, and now sailing is incorporated by better protected hulls from oil spill, and vessel communication has improved. These are the before and after pictures. Interesting fact is that another name for the Prince William Sound oil spill is the Exxon Valdez oil spill.
Minamata disease by Noah Sabato. Information on the Minamata disease. It was first identified in Minamata, Japan in 1956. It contaminated wildlife as well as humans. It was a neurological syndrome that is due to industrial pollution and environmental contamination. It affects the central nervous system. Specific cause of the disaster. Chiso, one of the biggest companies in Japan, released and dumped their waste in the Minamata Bay. The company produced acetaldehyde, mercury catalyst, and the byproduct was methyl mercury. They dumped over 60 deadly poisons, including vinyl chloride. Pollutions were digested by plankton. These fishes and birds ate these plankton, and humans ate the fish which were infected. Specific effects of the disaster on the environment. Mercury is harmful for the environment because it can accumulate in food and organisms. And it affects planktons to fishes, birds, and humans. Specific effects on humans. Adults had severe uncontrollable tremors, loss of motor control, sensory loss, affecting both auditory and visual senses, and many more. Infants and children had cerebral palsy, seizures, and microcephaly, and much more. It took more than 40 years to reverse the damage that Chiso Corporation has made. Mercury had to be removed from the bottom of the bay. It cost 48 billion yen. Japan has introduced mercury demand reduction in the halt of primary mercury mining, and national governments established quality standards. Interesting facts. The Chiso Corporation factory in Minamata was Japan's most advanced factory around the time of World War II. These are signs and symptoms of Minamata disease.
The Dust Bowl. History behind the Dust Bowl. Location was in Texas, Oklahoma, Colorado, New Mexico, and Kansas. The dates of occurrence were in 1930 to 1936. The Dust Bowl was a period of severe dust storms that greatly damaged the ecology and agriculture of the American and Canadian prairies during the 1930s. The timeline. In 1932, 14 storms were reported and 38 were expected the next year. In 1934, significant dust storms spread through the Dust Bowl area, continued moving west, which affected 27 states. In 1935, the Black Sunday occurred, known for the worst blizzard of the Dust Bowl. In 1936, Los Angeles Police Chief Davis sent policemen to patrol borders of Arizona and Oregon to keep undesirables out. The cause: economic depression coupled with extended drought, unusual high temperatures, poor agricultural practices. This resulted with wind erosion and contributed to making the Dust Bowl. impacts on society caused farmers to lose their livelihoods and their homes. Depression aggravated the plight of the Dust Bowl farmers. Prices for the crops they could grow fell below subsistence levels. In 1932, the federal government sent aid to the drought-affected states. New policies, more programs, and agencies were introduced. The federal government planted 220 million trees. This stopped the blowing of the soil that wrecked the Great Plains. Farmers had to change some methods to help ensure that the soil quantity did not break down. Some interesting facts were that the ecosystem disruption caused plagues of jackrabbits and grasshoppers. A newspaper reporter gave the Dust Bowl its name. One monster dust storm reached the Atlantic Ocean.
Chernobyl nuclear explosion by Jenna Shantz. It happened April 26, 1986 in Chernobyl, Ukraine, a former Soviet Union. Here it is on the map. The Chernobyl nuclear explosion accident in 1986 was caused by a flawed reactor design that was operated by an untrained worker. 2 Chernobyl plant workers died because of the explosion. Within a few weeks, about 28 to 31 people died of initial steam explosion, exposure to radiation and thermal burns, and 1 due to cardiac arrest. There was an increase in mortality and a decrease in reproduction in plants. In the first few years, plants and animals had shown many signs and symptoms of genetic effects from radiation in the air. During the night of May 9th and May 10th, people around the age of 26 were liquidated and sent to the area of explosion to clean up. About 600,000 Soviet cleanup workers built a sarcophagus to keep the radiation locked up. The workers, however, failed to seal off the building's ends and left openings in the ceiling which allowed water to get in and corrosion set in. Construction workers to this day are still working on cleaning up the sarcophagus and radiation. Once the sarcophagus is taken down, they will clean out the leftover radiation around reactor number 4. The cleanup process is expected to last through the year 2065, and by that time, scientists estimate that the radiation will have caused more than 40,000 cases of cancer. Government solutions and preventions. Designing a reactor system properly on a drawing board, having normal inspections throughout the year, having skilled workers who know what they are doing and take the job very seriously, and making sure there are multiple backup safety procedures in case anything goes wrong, and making sure the workers know all of the procedures. Although the exclusion zone is still uninhabitable, Ukrainian authorities opened up the area for tourism in 2011. Guides take the tourists to the wildlife as well as explore the ghost town around the area. In 2019, the airing of HBO miniseries Chernobyl, tour agencies said there has been a 40% increase in tourism.
The Love Canal was an enormous environmental disaster that happened from 1942 to 2004 in Niagara Falls, New York. It all started in 1894. William T. Love built a canal to function as a way for locals to get energy, but was never used due to the city's unstable financial state. It was used as a dumping site, and in 1942, the Hooker Chemical Company bought it. They lined the canal with clay and dumped over 21,000 tons of chemical waste. In 1953, the Niagara School Board bought the canal, covered it with soil, and sold it to the developers. They unknowingly built foundations, homes, and schools on the contaminated land, and as the years went by, the clay barriers started to break and leak. The extremely toxic chemicals seeped into yards, homes, and streets, and studies showed that the chemicals were a serious health threat and caused birth defects and diseases. There were higher miscarriage rates, chromosomal damage, and trees and plants turned black and died, and produce became contaminated. In 1976, the neighborhood found out what the Hooker Chemical Company did, and Lois Gibbs led a protest begging the government to do something. And in 1978, the New York Health Department declared the town a health emergency. Pregnant women and young children were evacuated, homes were bought out, and federal funds were used to help with the cleanup. In 1980, the Superfund Act was passed, and the Hooker Chemical Company was now responsible for helping cleaning up with the disaster. They, however, were bought by another company in the 60s, and that company now had to pay $20 million to its residents and $129 million to the government. The UPA built a trench system to channel the chemicals into the sewers, and they added another clay barrier to the canal to keep everything sealed. After 20 years of efforts and $400 million, the Love Canal was no longer on the Superfund list, and the area was safe again. The government passed multiple acts to prevent another environmental crisis like this, and they still monitor and test this area to this day to make sure that there isn't another accident.
London's Deadly Fog by Tree Tran and Joshua Carrillo. City and country. London's deadly fog happened in London, England. The coordinates for the location where the fog happened are 51.507 north and 0.127 west. Time and date London's deadly fog happened on December 5th, 1952 and lasted 5 days, till December 19th, 1952. The cause of the London fog. The London smoke was caused by a combination of industrial pollution and high-pressure weather conditions. Specific effects the disaster had on the environment. The Great Smog of London, also known as the Great Smog of 1952, was an extreme air pollution incident that occurred in 1952 in London, England. An anti-cyclone and windless condition coupled with extremely cold weather called airborne contaminants. Specific effects the disaster had on humans. The majority of the victims were either very young or old, or had respiratory problems. Marcus Lipton alleged in the House of Commons in February 1953 that the fog had resulted in 6,000 deaths and 25,000 more people claiming sickness benefits in London during that period. After the fog, mortality remained high for months.
How long it took for the disaster to be cleaned up? It took 5 days, December 5th through 9th, for the fog to be cleared up. Some of the effects that the fog had were lung problems and death. The fog killed over 12,000 people. What was done to clean the disaster? It took them a bit to get started on cleaning the problem. They waited for it to pass away, but after 4 years in 1956, they made laws for smoke-free areas and coal-burning-free areas. What is the government doing for this to not happen again? The United Kingdom's government made the first world's Clean Air Act in the world, and hoping this would never happen again. In 2030, they hope to ban all sales on fossil fuels for cars and go into the electrical age. Additional fact, the fog was both very cold and very warm. It caused more of the smoke to be trapped within the air 5 days that the fog existed. It made the air even more toxic by trapping in more industrial chemicals in the air. I'm not going to read the sources because there are too many letters and words I don't want to say. Goodbye.
Hello, my name is Sophia Aguayo, and this is my presentation on the Union Carbide Cyanide Gas Leak of Bhopal, India. Just a disclaimer before we start, I do stutter, so if I take a while to say a word, just calm down and mind your business. Okay. When and where this occurred. This occurred on December 2nd, 1984 through December 3rd, 1984. And it occurred at the Union Carbide Pesticide Plant in Bhopal, Madhya Pradesh, India. I'm sorry if I screwed up that name. What caused this? Water entered a tank containing methyl isocyanate, which caused a chemical reaction which made a bunch of toxic gases that were not good. What did it do to the environment? Over 2,000 animals were killed, and the water absorbed the gases, which then made the water undrinkable. What did it do to the humans? It's estimated that over 15,000 died, and over 500,000 were affected in some way. The measures taken to clean up. The cleanup started in 1994, and a secure landfill for the solar evaporation pond waste was constructed, and the waste was incinerated. Other facts. In 1999, it was discovered that the mercury levels of the area when the leak occurred were between 20,000 and 6 million. Goodness. And here are some pictures. And here are my sources.
North Pacific Guy Garbage Patch.
The location of the disaster is in the North Pacific Ocean. The western garbage patch is located near Japan, and the eastern garbage patch is located between Hawaii and California. The garbage patch spans water from the west coast of North America to Japan. There was no actual date that the disaster occurred, but it started accumulating, and by 1997 it was discovered. By 1997, the patch was already covering 1.6 million square kilometers. The garbage patch is 2 times the size of Texas. The cause and the effect. Over time, gyres can spit out debris that accumulate in them. It was created by the North Pacific Gyre. A gyre is a system of circulating currents in an ocean. The effect is marine debris, microplastics, plastic debris, and seagulls and seals and turtles are affected heavily, causing animals to eat trash instead of actual food, and all of these are killing animals, and less fish in the sea for fishers. So when anyone eats seafood like humans, they can get plastic toxins in their body as well. These are the effects of the garbage patch. You can see some garbage over here. There's some garbage tangling in with maybe coral. And then there's a turtle right here. This is the microplastics, and this is a seagull with trash in it. The efforts of trying to clean up. In the article USA Today, there is a young man who made an invention to catch some of the trash. The cleanup system includes a barrier that holds a 10-foot screen below it to catch plastics without interfering with marine life. The self-contained system uses natural currents of the sea to passively collect plastic debris in an effort to reduce waste in the ocean. The invention catches things from tiny microplastics to 1-ton ghost nets. OR and RS Marine Debris program is trying to reduce it and find the source so they can stop it / reduce the trash. These are my sources. Thank you.
Deepwater Horizon. What is the Deepwater Horizon? The Deepwater Horizon was an oil outbreak that traveled many miles across the ocean. It was a blowout that exploded. 11 crewmen on board lost their lives during this disaster. The plan of the Deepwater Horizon was to drill a well into the Royal Reservoir at the Macondo Prospect. Once they reached the oil, the plan was to seal the well with 3 cement plugs so that at a later time they can extract the oil. What was the cause of the Deepwater Horizon? As said before, the plan of the Deepwater Horizon was to drill a well into the oil reservoir at the Macondo Prospect, then later would secure it to extract oils from it. But in due time, everything went wrong, and an explosion occurred, killing many people. Where was the disaster? When did the disaster happen? The Deepwater Horizon incident happened in the Gulf of Mexico on April 10, 2010. This occurred in the Macondo Prospect, where the plan turned into an unexpected fatal disaster. How did it affect us humans? They say after the catastrophe, many people in the Gulf of Mexico started to have some effects of the incident. They started to feel sick and many different emotions, such as increased level of anxiety, depression, and respiratory issues that lasted for several years. The oil and gas industry put many human safety at risk just by itself. Almost 87 million were exposed to this toxic environment due to their home being close to the incident. What can the government do to refrain from this happening again? The government can't really do much other than funding money and the right equipment for these organizations who try their best to reduce massive oil spills from happening again. They can also help by protecting the people who are affected by oil spills by funding to their households or providing necessities. Although there are many places where oil spills occur, many organizations help by trying to restore and clean up many oil spills. How has this affected the environment? Many marine life did suffer to the Deepwater Horizon incident. Many of the sea creatures were drenched entirely coated in black oil, which was sticky and difficult to remove. Many sea life suffered due to so much oils being released into the ocean. Even using technology like seafloor mapping, it is completely impossible to restore the oceans to its former state. Oil disaster leaked 210 million gallons of oil and 1.8 million gallons of chemical depressants into the Gulf, coating, sickening, and killing wildlife. How did they clean up the mess? 1.8 million gallons of chemical depressants into the Gulf, coating, sickening, and killing wildlife. But that was the only option to clean the ocean from the oils. Though many marine life was destroyed, it would be a cleaner and safer place for future creatures. This process didn't just take one try. It took 85 to halt the flow of oil. Many of the toxins did reach wildlife in the ocean. Almost 1.8 million gallons of various chemical depressants. And on July 15, 2010, the oil spread started to decrease. Some facts. After the incident, everyone knew it would be such a hassle to clean up the oil spills, so the military stepped in to help the environment and help clean the place out. About 1,300 miles, 2,100 kilometers of the U.S. Gulf Coast was covered in oil. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Kyun Lee, and this is my man-made disaster project, the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear disaster. What happened? The Fukushima Daiichi nuclear disaster was a 2011 nuclear accident at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant in Okuma, Fukushima Prefecture, Japan. What caused it? Following a major earthquake, a 15-meter tsunami disabled the power supply and cooling of the 3 Fukushima Daiichi reactors, causing a nuclear accident beginning on March 11, 2011. And here are the important facts, but I'm not going to be reading them because I don't have enough time. The impact. As a result of the Fukushima accident, not only was radioactive material released into the atmosphere, but it also entered the water, which primarily was the water that was fed into the reactors for emergency cooling, but also groundwater penetrating into the reactor. And also mental health and increased suicide risk is also another long-term effect. Fukushima today. The accumulating water has been stored in tanks at the Fukushima Daiichi plant since 2011 when a massive earthquake or the disaster happened. Can it happen again? Yes. Yes, it can. Could it have been prevented? Yes, it could. Basically, there was not enough attention to it, and also the modeling, the digital modeling was not accurate. So, and that marks the end of my project. Thank you for watching.
Libby asbestos contamination. It was located in Libby, Montana, United States. It occurred during the 1920s through the 1990s. It all started when companies started digging up for vermiculite and began to use it in the building solution and as a soil conditioner. What effects did it have on the environment? The air quality became low due to the vermiculite dust spreading, which led to humans inhaling the toxins that caused diseases that eventually led to death.
It took about 20 years. The mining stopped in 1990. The national attention started in 1999. Effects: people are still dying since the dust was contaminating Libby for over 6 decades. What was done? Well, in 2008, Grace Company ordered $250 million to cover future cleanups. And in 2018, EPA has removed more than 1 million cubic yards of contaminated soil. The EPA had also made page with links that help people know if they have asbestosis in their homes. In 2009, the EPA declared a public health emergency so victims of asbestosis-related disease could receive federal health care assistance. Interesting fact. Vermiculite caused all this mess since it is dangerous for us to breathe in. However, it is also useful in seed sowing and propagation.
Hi, my name is Cassidy, and the man-made disaster my project is on is the Door to Hell. In Devraza, Turkmenistan in 1971, the ground beneath an oil rig site began to crack, which caused the rig to plummet into the earth. This created a crater. To eliminate the risk of air poisoning and gas leakage brought upon by this rig in the crater, scientists lit the gas on fire. However, it hasn't stopped burning ever since, which created the Door to Hell. Effects on the environment and humans. Before being lit on fire, there was a risk of air poisoning and gas leakage. The fire eliminated these risks, but the burning gas contributes heavily to global warming. Extremophile bacteria were found thriving in the crater's soil due to the high temperature and lack of nutrients in it. The surrounding village was forced to separate by the president of Turkmenistan because he believed it would be unappealing for the tourists who came to see the Door to Hell. Lastly, there were no casualties from the disaster. Residual effects. The door to hell continues to burn to the present day and has been burning since 1971, which is half a century. In addition, the surrounding area smells of sulfur, and the door to hell acts as a mass contributor to global warming. The door to hell was never cleaned up because Turkmenistan is struggling to fund a cleanup. Turkmenistan's leadership wants to, but because of their lack of funding, the door to hell will most likely remain untouched for a while. Due to the fact that this man-made disaster is so rare, Turkmenistan has expressed little to no information about how they will prevent it from happening again. However, they did recognize that lighting gas on fire would not be their plan of action to eliminate the environmental risks of a fallen oil rig ever again. The diameter of the door to hell is the length of 7 school buses lined up and nearly as deep as the height of 2 Niagara Falls stacked on top of each other. These are the sort.
This report is on 3 Mile Island, the power plant meltdown. This occurred in the London Township of Pennsylvania. The day was March 28, 1979, when 2 water coolers that helped reactor number 2 shut down, causing 50 to 60,000 gallons of radioactive water in. Radioactivity inside the plant reached 8 times the deadly amount, and steam escaped into the atmosphere, leaving radiation detected as far as a mile away. Causes. The reactor was operating at 97% of power at the time. A mechanical/electrical failure started that horrible series of events a little bit earlier. There was a minor malfunction in the water core specific for reactor 2. To the bottom right, you'll see an image. In the lower half, near the left on the reactor building, that's where the problems were occurring. We had blockage problems near the reactor core and steam generator. Human impacts. There seemed to have been no harm to people during the incident. However, some minor setbacks were made. Employees at the scene were unharmed and checked regularly. Expecting mothers fled the scene in fear of cancers or birth defects. Protests occurred at the neighboring cities to the 3 Mile Island. Some basic impacts included less power and electricity due to the faulty reactor. Damage control and cleanup. After some evacuation, cleanup was started in August of 1979, lasting to December of 1993. In 1984, the top/head of the reactor was removed. The following years, they worked on removing all the fuel. In 1991, the accident water began to evaporate. Finally, in 1993, storage was being monitored, ending the cleaning nearly costing $1 billion. Damage was best kept to a minimum as the workers were patient and quick. Government and new policies. Upgrades were made to the plant design. Workers identified the critical role of safety by the plants, and there was enhanced emergency preparedness, as well as many other safety precautions and investigations taken by the NRC.
Flint water crisis. Flint water crisis history. Location: Flint, Michigan, United States. Date: April 25, 2014. The city started drawing water from the Flint River without properly handling it, resulting in lead contamination. Flint started drawing water from the Flint River to its 100,000 inhabitants in April 2014 to save money. Flint has secured a clean water supply, provided filters to all the residents who requested them, and laid the groundwork for future growth. Cause of the crisis. Officials in Flint had neglected to apply corrosion controls in the river water. Lead from the city's old pipes leached into the water, resulting in dangerously high levels of lead in many residents' blood. The city issued a boil water warning after fecal bacteria was discovered in the water, contamination all over and in the water. Effects on the environment. The Flint Water River has acted as an unofficial dumping waste site for many local industries, from carriage and car factories to meatpacking plants and lumber and paper mills. Raw sewage and agricultural waste has been dumped in the waterways. 2 dogs in Flint area got lead poisoning from the contaminated water. Human impact. The contaminated water resulted in major water qualities and health issues to Flint residents. The Flint residents' complaints were ignored by the government officials. Lead poisoning can cause high blood pressure, heart disease, kidney disease, and decreased fertility in adults. Skin rashes, hair loss, and itchy skin were caused by the foul-smelling and off-tasting water piped Flint residents' home for about 18 months. Cleanup. The Flint water crisis was a public health emergency that lasted from 2014 to 2019. After the city of Flint, Michigan's drinking water was polluted with lead and probably Legionella bacteria, they cleaned out the old pipes to prevent any more infection in the water. More on the cleanup. Over 25,000 service lines have been reviewed by the region, with 85% of them being replaced. The Flint switched to a much easier and stable water supply than the river called Detroit Water Supplier. 2 men were cleaning up the trash by the river. Reducing the risk. Example 1. They are testing the water 6 parts per billion, which is significantly lower than the federal standard of 50 ppb. Example 2. The government will continue to provide free water filters and replacement cartridges and water testing kits until the service lines are replaced. Interesting fact. In order to reduce the water fund shortfall, the city announced that a new pipeline would be built to deliver water from Lake Huron to Flint. Resources.
Uniocarbon gas leak by Janine and Joel. What was a uniocarbon gas leak? Well, it was more commonly known as a Bhopal disaster and was known for one of the worst accidents in history. 45 tons of dangerous methane gas ended up leaking and killing around 15,000 to 20,000 people during the disaster. What caused the leak? Well, local activists and the Indian government claimed that the routine pipe maintained caused the backflow of the water into an MIC tank that triggered the disaster to happen. However, the YCC argued that the backflow was an act of sabotage. Where was the disaster occurred? The disaster occurred in the city of Bhopal and the state of Madhya Pradesh, India. Disaster occurred in December 3rd, 1984. What was the cause and effect of the cyanide gas leak? The cause and effect on the environment is that there was a huge air pollution that caused the environment so much that the water near the site is still toxic to today. And people who were close to the plant died, but the others suffered from dehydration, blindness, and respiration problems. How did they try to clean it up, and how long has it lasted? Sadly, it's still going to this day, but the company tried to help out by spending $2 million to help construction in a circular landfill to hold the wastes. What did the government do? Well, in March 1985, the government put on the Bhopal Gas Leak Disaster Act, and in settlement, they made the YYC give $47 million because of the cause of the accident. An interesting fact about the disaster is that the government officially claimed there was 59 deaths in total, but the activists claimed the number was close to 2,050 deaths.
The ecocide occurred in Vietnam at Da Nang Air Base. The date of this disaster when it happened the first time was April 10, 1962.
The U.S. force poured 80 millions of Agent Orange dioxin, which led poisoning the land, river, the ocean, and etc. The Agent Orange was chemical developed mainly by Monsanto. The chemicals were sprayed from aircraft containing soil, water, and air, the biomass and land complex, forest, agriculture, fisheries, livestock, and management.
How the disaster effect on humans led to high incidence of miscarriages, skin disease, cancer, birth defect, and congenital malformations.
The water and soil and air were contaminated from the chemical and deprived of food and hiding spots for soldiers. More than 5 million people have been diseased or diagnosed to the Agent Orange.
The ecocide is still being cleaned up because it fully hasn't gotten clean. The dioxin levels in Vietnam are really high compared to other countries, which makes it really hard to clean.
The first step was to access to contaminated areas by construction fencing and other barriers to protect the local population from the chemical. Second, the containment measures such as concrete caps, filtration systems, and cement traps can prevent dioxin from being transported to secondary sites such as ponds and streams. Then the isolated soils can be cleaned by dioxin through an appropriate. Lastly, the two main examples. The first example of its project institution, USAID signed agreements with Vietnam's Ministry of National Defense for an initial 5 years. $183 million contribution to the dioxide repetition in 2018. The last example, assessing the ecocide with the nationals about the amount of dioxide in Vietnam.
This report is on the Exxon Valdez oil spill. The ship had struck the Bly Reef, which caused the oil spill. It contaminated about 1,990 kilometers of the shore. It killed 2,000 or more otters, 300 harbor seals, 250,000 seabirds, killer whales, and bald eagles. Spill had affected humans because of economic loss, costed about $2.8 billion. It devastated the local fish and tourism economy. It caused harm to those who depended on commercial fishing. The spill took 3 years to clean from 1989 to 1992.
Even till this day, the embryonic salmon and herring that were exposed to the spills still showed signs of heart defects and other effects. In 2009, a study was shown that killer whales population have still not recovered. Even cleanup workers and their spouses reported increased depression and domestic disputes. In the disaster, they skimmed the oil from the water surface. Also, they sprayed oil dispersant chemicals into the waters and onto the shore. They washed oil beaches with hot water and rescued, cleaned the animals that were in the oil. To reduce the risk of this to ever happen again, we must use automatic nozzle shutoffs to prevent refilling fuel tanks. A double hole design could easily prevent things that caused the Exxon oil spill. The government has an emergency response plan for oil spills, and we must have equipment ready for situations like this.